Happy anniversary, guys. Your baby, Bring It On, once called the Citizen Kane of cheerleading movies by Roger Ebert. I did not make that up. That is an actual fact. It's 20 years old this month, almost old enough to drink. Can you guys believe it?
Can you believe it?
No, it's crazy. It is crazy.
I can't believe it. Well, Jessica, as the screenwriter, this whole thing started in your head. Tell us about the genesis of Bring It On and what inspired you to write it in the first place.
Well, I loved those cheerleading competitions. I think I was collapsed on the couch one Thanksgiving holiday in college, and I was watching back-to-back competitions. I couldn't believe they were showing them from like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I was hooked as a former gymnast. I missed the tumbling, and it combined all the excitement of gymnastics and tumbling with kind of the electric circus aspect of the partner stunting. And so I was hooked, and I just kind of filed it away, and I was like, this is really interesting. And it's also interesting they're doing kind of watered down hip hop moves, but I know from having been a hip hop journalist at Spin Magazine and covered that music in its infancy, I was like, they're doing hip hop. They're doing like their own version of hip hop. What if? And that's kind of how it was born. It's just taking my love of hip hop and my obsession with these competitions and just kind of mixing them together. And here we are 20 years later.
I was going to ask if it was autobiographical, if you were a cheerleader, but it sounded you were a gymnast. So it sounds like you were more the Eliza Dushku.
Yeah, I was a gymnast. I did cheer. We called it back in the day. I think it's called Pop Warner in some places. It was called midget football, which is not very PC, but it was like little kids football. And I cheered for that, but it was literally sweatshirts with hand sewn letters on them and homemade skirts. It was not what you're seeing in the movie. But yeah, I love gymnastics. I competed. And I made Stick It so the magma of Bring It On comes from my love of gymnastics originally. Yeah.
Peyton, tell us how you got involved with Bring It On.
I was doing the Upright Citizens Brigade comedy show at Comedy Central at that time. I was in New York, and I was directing, I think, the first 3 episodes of season 2. And I got a call about this script. I'd been really wanting to do a feature, and I'd been looking at high school movies because I love the genre. And my agent called and said, there's this script called Cheer Fever. I was like, what? Cheer Fever? What is it? And he said, well, it takes place in the world of competitive high school cheerleading. And I knew nothing about it. And I said, send it. I want to read it. And I was blown away by this script because it was this subculture that I really didn't know existed before. And Jessica had laid it out so clearly, like whoever wrote this script had done such research about it, and it was so vividly portrayed. And it started off like in the first 2 pages of the script, that opening cheer, pretty much verbatim what we shot in the movie was there from the get-go. And it was so great because it confronts your preconceived notions about cheerleaders right up top. And for me, it was like a Busby Berkeley musical. It's like at the very beginning, this movie is just grabbing you by the throat and saying, pay attention, you're about to go on this ride. And like, I'd been reading so many scripts at the time, and that just leapt out, and I met on it. I know, Jessica, there were a couple of other people at the time, I think, up for it, but I'd done some, lower budget indie rock music videos and a lot of television at that point. And fortunately ended up getting the movie and finished my last episode of UCB and headed back, and we leapt into pre-production really quickly.
So you said it was originally called Cheer Fever?
It was.
And at what point did that change?
We were Cheer Fever all through production. And I think it was, sometime in post-production as the Universal marketing people were trying to figure out, they have their algorithms and everything. And it's like, well, the word cheer is really, maybe it's going to be too narrow an audience to find, and we would say like, well, it is a movie about cheerleading. I don't want to mislead anybody. And I remember lists and lists of stuff being made about alternate titles. I have them all somewhere, but Bring It On is what everybody landed on. And I think people liked it because there's just a confrontational nature to that title. And they say, Gabrielle's character Isis says, bring it in the movie. And it was close enough, but we liked this sort of like, it just had a lot of attitude. It looked really good on the poster. And I remember one day saying, I don't know, man. I don't know if this title's going to stand the test of time. And I was wrong about that.
Well, Hollywood goes through so many ebbs and flows in terms of, what the industry is greenlighting, what they're looking for, what they're producing. What was the climate at the time in the late 90s when you guys were developing this? And how was it generally received? I mean, did you have to pitch it around town? Was it a pretty easy sell? What can you say about that?
Well, it wasn't developed. I pitched it 28 times. I had 27 no's. It was an 18-page pitch outline. So I pitched the whole movie. And which I'm about to publish. So I've been revisiting the pitch outline, which is pretty crazy because it's a lot is intact, remained intact. As I like to say, Peyton found in the marble, the chunk of marble, he found the David. It was a 120-page script. So I was writing it I sold it in October of 1996. We were in production, I think in Q1, Q2 of 1999. And it went through, I wrote a first draft and I did some slight revisions, but it kind of it was just waiting. We did a reading before Peyton was on where Gabrielle played Isis. So Gabrielle was always Isis. Eliza played Missy. And so they're in the movie and they were always those characters, which is kind of cool. And then we were in production in 99. And then Peyton called me. I was in production or pre-production. No, I was writing Truth About Charlie in New York. And he called me and said, hey, they're going to throw more money at it for some additional photography. I was like, what? And so I wrote the additional scenes from New York and faxed them. So those don't exist anymore. But yeah, it was a pretty quick, relative to Hollywood, it was pretty quick, but it wasn't really developed. It was sold as a pitch, which is really unusual.
Yeah. Where would you say the film has the story most departed from that pitch, from those earliest drafts? Like you said, most of it remained intact, but where did it most dramatically change?
Well, it went from being a miniseries that was like 3 hours long. It was 120 pages. So if
I joke with Jessica about back in the days when they did this TV cut of Godfather and Godfather Part 2, the Godfather saga. This was like the Bring It On saga, which was great because in that original draft, Jessica had dealt with like the relationship between the cheerleaders and the dance squad. And there was the coach character who ended up not being in the movie at all, who was a big character, but it was so specific. And even though it didn't make the movie, it really did give you, or gave me anyway, this context for that whole world. It was so specific and so well researched, but it was sprawling. It was amazing.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
The film really holds up. I rewatched it last night. Still great as it ever was, and it really does feel ahead of its time in terms of its comments on cultural appropriation, specifically these white cheerleaders stealing from inner city Black girls. How important was that aspect of it in the conceptual phase?
Yeah, I mean, they always won. They were always the winning squad. It was very much Rocky. I think we've invoked Rocky quite a bit. I think having covered hip hop in New York and heard chatter about appropriation in music, kind of in the era of the Beastie Boys and Vanilla Ice and Snow. I mean, the Beastie Boys to a lesser extent because they kind of had their own vibe. But yeah, it was definitely in mind for me. The Clovers always were the winners, the clear winners, right?
That was exactly my next question. What if you guys if there were any like studio notes that said, well, what if the Toros won instead?
I don't remember specifically. I just remember that always being baked in. And one of the things that I was really, frankly, surprised at when I first read the script was, because it was this very energetic cheerleader comedy, but then these themes started sneaking their way into the movie very early on. And it was always about cultural appropriation. And that was such a unique thing, at the time. I hadn't seen that in a movie. And one of the things that really grabbed me about it, that these were rivals, and it was about like, how do we level the playing field? And weirdly now, where we're all talking about not only cultural appropriation, but we're talking about, these issues of race and all this, and sort of, you're dealing with a movie where the protagonists of the movie were the 5-time national champions in cheerleading, but that was all built on the back of this theft. They just have outright been stealing these routines. And Kirsten's character, Torrance, trying to figure out, realizing that's the case, and then trying to figure out how to make it right. And also like, screwing up along the way, making mistakes in terms of how to make it right. And her best sort of white privileged girl mind sort of saying, oh, I'll just get my dad's company to write a check and get the Clovers in. And that idea not being well received by the Clovers, which was always in Jessica's script. And I thought it was very smart and very forward thinking and not easy, right? It's like I knew that if we were going to sort of really deal with these themes in the context of a cheerleader comedy, we had to be smart about it, and we had to sort of, you know, not hit people over the head. But that for me, I think is something that we talked a lot about, Jessica, and then also, you know, with Kirsten, with Gabrielle, and the performance and how that was going to be played. You know, we never saw the Clovers as antagonists; they were rivals, and also like that was the ending. That was the Rocky ending. Is that, you know, for Torrance, they came in second, but it felt like first to her. She's taking her first steps into sort of awareness.
Right.
And she gets to have a learning curve, which I think is what we're all on now. You know, I think everybody's on a learning curve right now. What does this mean for me personally? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for us nationally? Where are we? Mm-hmm. And it's amazing looking back. It's amazing to see the analogy. It's really kind of takes my breath away. It's extraordinary. Yeah. It feels sad on the one hand, but also like, wow, we were really, we were ahead of the curve.
100%. And it's nice to watch the film, to revisit the film through the eyes of the 2020 experience, as we all, you know, do soul searching over those aspects of our life where, you know, where we've appropriated or benefited from some those types of things. So yeah, much respect to you guys for that. This is one of those movies that's so oft quoted by its fans. It has very distinctive dialogue. Jessica, how did you nail that down? You know, ensure that it was timely in the year.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think Dan Waters, who wrote Heathers, had advised me. He said, don't use today's teen lingo because it'll be stale by the time the movie comes out. So shout out to Dan Waters. And having been somebody who was pretty obsessed with gay culture, I always gravitated towards gay men and loved their lingo and their bitchiness and their funniness. I think I was very inspired by living in West Hollywood at the time, the epicenter of, you know, gay culture in America in some ways. I was inspired by that. And so to me, I wanted them to sound like the cool gay guys. And I think teenage girls, there's a lot of jokes that have been written, you know, teenage girls and gay men, very similar. They're obsessed with boys, you know, they can be a little bitchy, a little bit mean girly. So that was my inspiration for writing them. And then the whole portmanteau stuff that I'm doing with language, put the itch and bitch, the hell and hello, the duh and duh, that was, I stumbled upon. That took me a minute. It wasn't there right away, but I was hanging out with some gay guys and I said, you put the itch and bitch. And they were like, oh, you know, and they had such a great reaction. And I was like, boom, that's it. And so then I kind of just overdid it, probably overkill, which is my favorite go-to, just like hit into the ground. Are you getting it? And so that was kind of the genesis of the language.
Peyton, was there any osmosis? Did you find yourself speaking like a high school cheerleader on set at all?
No, I found myself being the camp counselor with all these like young actors on that set who, you know, Kirsten had just turned 17. Eliza was 18. Gabrielle was a little older. She was 27. But back to that language, that was the thing that struck me in the script is like, I really responded to it as a subculture movie. Like the subculture I didn't know anything about and dove into headlong, and that, you know, every great subculture has its own language. And that Jessica had written that out so specifically. And then the challenge directorially of doing a movie that was heightened in that way, but also grounded enough. And I loved it. And the actors loved it. And I remember constantly actors coming up with suggestions of how to build on that stuff in their characters. But it definitely, to me, was distinctive. But I think weirdly also does help it not be stuck in amber in this particular time period. It's such a specific way of speaking that it, you know, it kind of flies now as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, let's talk some casting, because you mentioned the amazing ensemble you guys brought together for this film. Kirsten Dunst, she was, I mean, already kind of a seasoned vet, I think, by the time 2000 came around, even though she was only 17. How did she come into the picture, and did that feel like a big score for you guys at the time?
Yeah, we've been casting for a while, and I think it had been offered to her initially, and she wasn't available. And we both happened to be at William Morris at the time. And Joseph Middleton had said, the casting director said, I think she's with William Morris. I think there might be some room. And Peyton came on, and it was definitely like, okay, she's at the top of the list again. Can we do a full court press? And I remember calling her agent then, who had been my agent's former assistant. And I said, oh, can I talk to her? Can we just? And so I did a call with her, and we just kind of made the case.
I remember thinking like, I was thrilled when we got Kirsten because as you said, from a very young age, she's such a serious, soulful actor. And she's great dramatically, but she's also great comedically. And she really grounds that movie. I mean, all Eliza and Gabrielle as well, but Kirsten kind of being front and center of it. It's a tough thing because she's in, almost every scene of that movie. And she added this grounded quality to this heightened character, and she just dove in and became that character, who's obviously very different than Kirsten is in real life. But I just was struck from a very young age. Her instincts were just always so good and so unexpected and really soulful.
Mm-hmm. Well, she had been a working actress for a number of years, but this film really marked a breakout for Gabrielle Union. What was your impression of Gabby at the time, and how did she get involved?
Jessica met Gabrielle first, right? She did the original read-through,
I think. The original read-through that was at a theater on La Brea, and she was just it. It was just, she was it. She walked in and it was just boom. I think it was her, she had seniority, being a little older, a little more in her ground. She was just grounded in who she was, I think, as a performer and a human being. And that was obvious. I mean, she was very, very much, I did not forget her. I was like, that's her. And similarly, yeah, she was incredible.
Yeah, she has this commanding presence. And, it was important in this movie, if you look at it, how we introduce each of the characters, they all get a pretty, dynamic entrance. Mm-hmm. But of all of them, I think it was important for Isis to have a really, really badass entrance into this movie. But she's just got such presence, and she was so additive in terms of that character. And as we went through the movie and we're sort of just challenging all the moments, and particularly when we were dealing with the stuff between Torrance and Isis, she was invaluable in terms of her point of view and really making that character her own. Mm-hmm. And I remember the time, talking a lot. I mean, this was 99 when we were shooting the movie, talking a lot about Michael Jordan, who I went to school in North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Jordan was such an influence on me. I love Michael Jordan, but that idea of someone who is just so good and so athletic and so confident, and that really informed, I just particularly think of at the end of the movie when Torrance and Isis are talking about, them coming in first, and she says, you guys were better. And she's like, we were, weren't we? And it's, it's just a statement of fact. They were better. And I love that. We really talked about just her presence, but that's something that Gabrielle she just has it innately.
She was 27 at the time. Kirsten was 17, 10 years older. Was that ever an issue? That there was age difference? Did you guys have to debate that at all?
It was never an issue. It was more like you, in a great way, I think, felt it, that she was just more self-possessed. She was very clear about who she was, as opposed to, Kirsten's character, Torrance, who's just sort of like her world has been rocked and she's on the back foot and she's trying to figure out what this means. Her sort of white privilege world has been exposed, and she's trying to figure out how to become more aware and how to make it right. So I think in that way, that age difference actually helps those characters, because Isis as a character is very clear about what she wants, about the wrongs that she wants to right. And yeah, I think her age probably helped.
Plus, it follows like grand Hollywood tradition, right? Weren't the Grease cast members 55 when they shot?
Yeah. No, they were much older. Absolutely.
I feel like every film has its alternate universe casting tales. I know Gabrielle and Eliza were on from the ground floor, but were there any other notable names that auditioned or read for parts, or who you guys considered that weren't ultimately cast?
I will say, for the reading, I can tell you, the reading, Amy Smart read the Torrance part, and Ethan Embry played the Cliff part at the reading. And in terms of actors who read, I mean, everybody read. It was
Everybody
an embarrassment of riches. Yeah, I do remember learning something just as a person in Hollywood. I will shout out. I don't remember what part she read for. It must have been Torrance. Leslie Bibb came in and read, and she was such a pro and so relaxed. And I had never seen an actor, like, it was really like first time being in real auditions and watching actors work. She wasn't off book, and she was so relaxed and good, even holding it in her hand. And I was so impressed with that. But yeah, a lot of people get Marley Shelton read for it. She was darling, and is a lovely, lovely human. Who else? I can't remember.
I'm trying to think, because I remember, like, we just saw Joseph Middleton, the casting director, brought in everybody of that age. I'm thrilled that we got Jesse Bradford for Cliff, because I had seen Soderbergh's movie King of the Hill.
Oh, I love that movie.
And Jesse just had this thing. He's such a great looking kid, but also a really soulful guy, and very different in energy, than a cheerleader. He was very cerebral in a great way. But yeah, I think we saw like James Franco and Jason Schwartzman and all these different people for that role. And it was sort of like trying to figure out, this puzzle piece of that main cast, and who complimented who more. And, again, just thinking about simple things like Kirsten Dunst and Eliza Dushku in the frame together, you immediately get these are very different kids and very different energies. So Jesse, I think, was just perfect for that role. He's terrific.
According to the internet, Marley Shelton was originally cast as Torrance. Is that true?
She wasn't originally cast. I had a lunch with her about the movie, and met with her, and she was delightful and really, really great. And we're thinking like, oh, Marley, she could be a really good Torrance. And Joseph Middleton said to me, he's like, yeah, okay, before you get too married to that idea, she is up for this other movie. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, and it's another cheerleader movie. And my first reaction was like, wait, holy shit, there's another cheerleader movie being made? Wait, let's talk about that. And long story short, Marley ended up doing the other cheerleader movie, Sugar and Spice. And that's when we went back to Kirsten.
Well, speaking of Kirsten and also Jesse, considering the number of takes that go into any scene, how long did Kirsten and Jesse spend brushing their teeth to film the
I want to know that too. Actually, I was not there. How long? How many takes?
They had bloody gums. Bloody gums. I made them do it. I went Kubrick on them. We did 80 takes. No, they. I knew that scene because it's a wordless scene. And it required a lot of spontaneity. And I wanted to do the camera setups and try and get their earliest takes, like their first initial pass, and try and get whatever that was going to bring. So my memory is that we didn't do too many takes. I mean, we did this frontal shot and these sort of side angles, and try to keep it photographically as simple as possible so we could get some spontaneity from them. But yeah, I don't remember any bleeding gums. I do remember Jesse, both of them, thinking like, how many times do we have to brush our teeth? But it was I think it was the last day of the schedule we shot that. It was very late in the schedule. But yeah, that was something that those two actors just found something in that scene that was great.
Well, a film has caught on in the zeitgeist when it gets mercilessly parodied in the years following its release. And that definitely happened to some extent with Bring It On. To the point, honest to God, to the point where when I rewatched it, for some reason, I thought the exchange "Bring It On," it's already brought in, was actually Bring It On.
This is something that's it's from not another teen movie. And Gabrielle will tell the story. How many people come up to Gabrielle and quote that line to her, and Kirsten too. They always quote that line, and they're at the point now where they don't even correct somebody. It's like, oh yeah, thank you, that's great.
What was it like for you guys to watch the film, catch on? It's considered, not like it was unsuccessful from the get-go, but it is considered a cult classic. What was it like for you guys to watch the film sort of catch on over the years?
It's really gratifying. It's incredibly gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you never know. I mean, honestly, I just as filmmakers, we knew how we felt about the movie, but when you're kind of going out with a competitive cheerleader comedy, you just don't, as with any movie, you don't know how it's going to be received. You hope that it's going to connect with an audience, and you the things that you connect with. But it shocked us. I mean, I think Jessica and I privately were like, I think we did a good job. And we have to whatever happens, we have to be happy about this outcome. And we were going up against The Art of War. Wasn't that was the thing that was
Wesley Snipes. Yes, that was predicted by Box Office Mojo to win the weekend. That was the prediction.
Yeah, all the smart betting was on Art of War. But the tracking started looking good, but that just makes you nervous. But as we got to the opening night, we were all sort of around, and we met up at Universal and had dinner. And I remember being with Kirsten.
Opening night. Here's the photo of Peyton and I getting the news that it was #1. And I don't know if you can see it, but we are absolutely delighted.
That's awesome.
This is on my desk.
I love it. And I remember Kirsten and her mom being up there, and Kirsten getting the call from her agent. And again, she's 17, and she hung up the phone, and she's like, I got my first #1 movie. She was so emotional. It was so cute. It's one of my most vivid memories from that night.
Sweet.
Well, Bring It On obviously required a lot of choreography. Peyton, did that ultimately help prep you for the action scenes that you'd have to stage later in your career in the Marvel universe?
Without a doubt. I mean, because those cheer sequences, they're the action scenes of that movie. And they do require every bit the choreography, and more so. Like, I honestly, at this point, having done a lot of stunt shoots and things, I don't think I was ever more quietly terrified than I was on Bring It On, because, those cheerleaders, they train and rehearse, and they go out and do their routine. But we had to have those actors and cheerleaders go out and do the routine multiple times to get all the camera coverage. And my worst nightmare was that someone was going to, break an ankle or get a concussion. And we were very fortunate in that regard. I think we had one minor ankle injury, was my memory, but it's a little terrifying. But yeah, definitely. I mean, it's because it was all about pre-production and making sure that everybody was safe, and it's and getting the coverage, because they're action sequences.
Yeah. Well, Peyton, you and I have talked so much over the years about the Ant-Man movies. So I am contractually obligated to ask you at least one Ant-Man 3 question while I have you here. With Ant-Man and the Wasp, as its title implies, there was a gender balance brought to the series with the emergence of Evangeline as a superhero. Do you see that carrying on into Ant-Man 3? Do you expect Paul and Evangeline to share equal billing at screen time, or is it still an Ant-Man movie first and foremost?
No, it's they're a partnership, and she's a very, very important part of that. And that was a very, very gratifying thing to, I guess technically we were the first Marvel movie with a female hero in the title of the movie. But that was finding that balance in that movie. It's very important to me, because that's very much a men's playing field historically, but that's really, really changing now in a great way.
Yeah. Where are you guys in the process? Have you cracked the story yet?
We have. Yes. Nothing is official yet, but we're quietly working. We're working through the pandemic.
All right.
I love both those movies so much. The first one and the second one, they're so incredible. And Peyton did an incredible job. I can't wait to see the third one.
Thank you.
The drumming lives. I was so stoked to see the drumming.
We had an
ant drumming. Is there going to be more close hand magic? Is there going to be more up close? Is there going to be more?
I have to spoil it. I can't say.
Guys, this was so much fun. Thank you guys both so much.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Always great.